Okay. The purpose of this activity, close reading, we're going to examine the 9 standards in Common Core. Each week we'll focus on something different. This week we're focusing on citing textual evidence. Okay, that is the purpose of the reading for today. Is everybody clear?
Yeah.
Okay. First time we read this, I'm going to read it aloud. I don't want you highlighting, I don't want you underlining, I don't want you circling. Just simply follow along and read. You're listening for fluency. What is fluency?
Don't do the jump out.
No.
You said fluency?
Fluency.
Like, keep going.
Okay, how it sounds. Alright, the flow of the text, the flow of the words. You're listening for fluency. All I want you to do is to read along silently. Okay? Ladder. Part 1, Chapter 1, excerpt, page 18. The first hook in Ladder Company 20 came up Mercer Street so fast, says Rubiano, that it almost didn't make the turn into Washington Place. The firemen were having trouble with their horses. They weren't trained for the blood and the sound of the falling bodies. Alright, that's the first read. Look at the bottom of your papers. There are 2 questions. Everybody see those questions? Alright, let's read the questions aloud. Read the first one aloud, Jason.
How well were New York City's fire department prepared for a fire on this
Magnitude. A fire of this magnitude. Second question, Kobe.
Explain how the behavior of the horses affected the NYCFD response.
Alright, these are the 2 questions. These are the 2 questions that you need to answer, and you have the answer based on what you saw today in the documentary, and then the article right here. The second time we read this article, the only thing that you're going to text render is any evidence from the text that support the answer for these 2 questions. Do I need to say it again? Yes? Okay. While we're reading the second time, you have your highlighter in hand. You're going to text render. The only information you are text rendering is the evidence from the text that you will use to answer your 2 questions at the bottom. Okay?
Okay.
So that's what we're text rendering today. That's what is important today, the evidence. Alright, so now you got your highlighter in hand, cap off highlighter, highlighter in hand. I'm going to read it again for the second, just to model what you'll be doing in your small groups after today. Alright, Ladder Part 1, Chapter 1, excerpt, page 18. The first hook and ladder, Company 20, came up Mercer Street so fast, says Rubiano, that it almost didn't make the turn into Washington Place. The firemen were having trouble with their horses. They weren't trained for the blood and the sound of the falling bodies. Okay, finish highlighting. And then let's talk about what you text rendered. Alright, so before we start discussing, what information were you guys supposed to text render?
Just about the 2 questions.
Okay, evidence to support how you would answer your 2 questions at the bottom. Alright, first question, how well were New York City fire departments prepared for a fire of this magnitude? So whatever you text render should support your answer for that question. Who wants to share what they highlighted? There's at least 3 pieces of evidence from the text. Christian.
Company 20 had the tallest ladder in my fire department.
Alright, does everybody see where that is? Yes. Fourth, I say paragraph, but 4th section of the reading. Company 20 had the tallest ladder in the fire department. Alright, Christian, second piece.
But the ladder has been raised in movement as it was raised to its furthest length. It only reached the 6th floor.
Alright, go 4 more down. But the ladder had been raised. It was raised to the fullest length. It reached only to the 6th floor. And Christian, what else did you find?
The men did the best they could, but there was no apparatus in the department to cope with this kind of fire.
Alright, the men did the best that they could, but there is no apparatus in the department to cope with this kind of fire. Christian, you know what an apparatus is? Or based on your context clues, could you describe what an apparatus probably is?
answer.
Hmm?
I'll answer.
I want you to answer, yeah.
No, like, that's what this is, like an
Oh, an
answer.
answer?
Yeah.
Good, wrong answer.
It's a type of utensil. I know, that was ready for that, but,
Yeah, but I don't.
I know you ain't talking about it.
No. Okay, in this case, apparatus is talking about a machine or some type of tool that could have been useful in this type of situation.
That's not like that answer.
The answer, okay, yeah, okay. Alright, so that's what an apparatus is. Number 2, second question. Explain how the behavior of the horses affected the NYCFD. Jason, what did you text render?
The horses weren't used to the blood and the sound of the falling bodies.
Okay, you guys see that in the second paragraph? They weren't trained for the blood and the sound of falling bodies.
They kept on around their hind legs. And the police had to pull. Yeah, the hitching canes and pull them away.
Okay, so because of their behavior, that was a distraction to the fire department. Would you agree or disagree? Agreed. So because of the horse's behavior, what did the firemen have to stop and do?
Control the horses.
They had to stop and pay attention to what the horses were doing instead of doing what? Paying attention to the fire. Okay? Alright, so now what I want you guys to do, because you've text rendered, you've got evidence in the text, I want you to try to answer the 2 questions at the bottom, but you have to cite your evidence. Okay? So, for example, restate your problem. Where do you find your problem? No. Where's your problem? In the what?
Question.
In your question. Okay. Restate the problem. In this case, you're restating your question. Okay? When you're restating your question, okay, you're addressing what the problem is. Then you go into answering the question, which is your explanation, right? How you answer a question is your explanation. When you're giving your explanation to show the validity of your answer, the validity that it's valid, you have to give evidence to support that. Textual evidence. And your textual evidence is what you guys text rendered. Okay? So as you're discussing your answer within your written answer, make sure you give your evidence. Alright, so that's what I want you guys to do right now. Number 1, how well were New York City fire departments prepared for a fire of this magnitude? What does magnitude mean?
This level.
Okay, this level, this big. So this was a pretty big deal. Alright, so I have to restate my problem. According to the text, NYCFD, what does that stand for?
New York
City Fire Department were not prepared for a fire
Because they had bought the wrong size level.
of this magnitude that occurred at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Tell me why I included Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. To let you know what fire I'm talking about. I could be talking about any kind of fire. But right here, by naming, you know the city, right? You might know the year.
Bomb.
What was the year?
Bomb.
1911. So now you have a sense of time.
Bomb.
And then we're talking about unions and working conditions, so that should take you back to unfair working conditions. So you know something about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Yeah. Okay.
The firefighters rode horses too.
1911. Automobiles are not common.
So what they did, how they bought the water horses?
Horses.
So.
So do you see the significance of the horse behavior
Oh yeah.
to the fire? Okay. All right. So according to the text, Our text is the article. NYCFD were not prepared for a fire of this magnitude that occurred at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The ladder, and then you could do right here, you could quote right here where it says, but the ladder had been raised, Rubiano says, it was raised to its fullest length. It reached only to the 6th floor. The ladder, quotation, reached only
To the sixth
to
floor.
the 6th floor. This ladder was unable to rescue the trapped workers on the 8th and what other floor? Ninth floor, where the fire was started or had begun. Okay, so let's look at this answer. According to the text, NYCFD were not prepared for a fire of this magnitude that occurred at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Did I answer the question initially? Yes. Where's my answer?
The first thing.
How did I answer? I said what? Not prepared. I'm telling you they were not prepared. Now, I have to prove to you how I know they were not prepared. And how do I prove that to you?
Textual evidence.
By citing textual evidence. Because by citing textual evidence, can you argue?
No.
No, because it's right there on the paper. You can read it, I can read it. So there's my evidence. The ladder, quote, reached only to the 6th floor, end quote. This ladder wasn't able to rescue the trapped workers on the 8th and 9th floor where the fire had started. Or where the fire was taking place or had begun. Okay, so this is how you cite textual evidence. Any questions? Does anybody want to share what they read? Did anything similar to this? Christian?
The NYC Fire Department were not prepared for a fire of this magnitude. This can be answered because the ladder was raised to its fullest length and it only reached to the 6th floor, and most other people were on the 8th and 9th floor. Also, the text states that the men did the best they could, but there's no apparatus in the department to code this kind of fire.
Yeah, that's good. In this case, what could an apparatus have been?
Machine.
What type of machine?
A taller ladder.
A taller ladder. If they had a taller ladder, then they would have had an apparatus to be able to rescue the workers from the 8th and 9th floor. They didn't. Okay. Good job. What was your question?